Some years ago, the Divine Mother was asked the question, how do we know when it's our head or our heart? And Divine Mother's answer was very simple. What comes first? And we can all understand that, and we can examine that. But is it quite so simple as that? As was said the other day, someone came the other day and said that they stay in presence as much as they can, but how can they tell when it's their divine self? And so let's put a couple of ingredients into our own pot and see what they bring up for us. First of all, there's a little twisting of a saying of Rumi, and it says, what happens when we offer our self as the sacrifice? What happens when we offer the self as the sacrifice? So there's a story about that king. He was called Hatim Tai, and he was beloved of all his people. His kingdom was peaceful and prosperous. He was attentive to all the needs of those who came to him from amongst his populace. They revered and loved him. But around his kingdom there were other kingdoms that wanted to take over Hatim Tai's prosperous place. And it came to the ears of Hatim Tai that a neighboring kingdom, the king of which was preparing to invade him with his army. So all of the people who were around King Hatim Tai said, we will be beside you, we will fight for you to the death. But Hatim Tai said, no, there can be no blood let on my behalf. I will leave. And so he took himself off to the mountains, not to be seen again, or so it seemed. And the marauding army of the neighboring kingdom came in and took over the palace and the ruling of that great and prosperous place. But the people were still true to Hatim Tai, and they would leave food for him. And certainly no one would ever admit that they knew where Hatim Tai was in hiding. But the usurping king decried Hatim Tai, stating to the populace what a coward he was, leaving and leaving all his people. And he put out a very large reward for the capture of this king. Now it so happened that there was an elderly couple, a woodchopper and his wife, who were passing by the hiding place of where King Hatim Tai was, and he overheard their conversation. The wife was saying to her husband, look at us, we are so poor, we have nothing, not even a decent pair of sandals to put on our feet. And they have put out a great reward if King Hatim Tai is captured. Let us find him. We can easily find out where he is, and we can live comfortably for the rest of our days. But the husband scolded his wife roundly, telling her, how can you say that about our king who has been kind to us, taken care of us? No, speak not like this, wife. But King Hatimtai had overheard this conversation, and he came out from his hiding place, and he said, "I am he who you are seeking. Take me to the king and claim your reward, and live peacefully and prosperously for the rest of your days." But as it happened, a troop of the soldiers of that king came passing by and saw these three, and immediately took them all into custody, taking them to their usurping king. Now when they were before this king, King Hatimtai stood forth and said, "I am King Hatimtai, and this couple found me, and so they should be given their reward, so that they can live peacefully and prosperously for the rest of their days." Now when the marauding king heard this from the lips of King Hatimtai, he was immediately changed, and he said, after pondering, "I can do better than this. Not only will this couple have their reward, but I return to you your kingdom, your throne, your people." And this is indeed what happened. So when we put together this changed saying of Rumi, what happens when we offer ourselves, ourself, as the sacrifice? And this little simple story of King Hatimtai, what answer would you have given to this being who said, "I live in a state of presence as much as I can, but how do I know when it's my divine self?" What would your response have been? Have you examined, looked at your relationship with life and what it is that comes first when you're confronted by a situation or a person? What happens then? What does it mean to sacrifice the self? And what have you discovered in your relationship with life that occurs when this happens? The sacrifice of self. What does it mean?
Well, it's like then it so totally changes the energy of the situation, because in that there is no self or no ego.
That's right.
That changes it.
There's no gladiator, there's no defense, there's no reaction of an I which would say, "How can you say that to me?" Isn't it so?
It's like doing the right thing without any regard for consequences.
That's
We don't
right.
even think about it.
Fearlessly. Like the old monk standing in front of the samurai, willing to die for the truth of that moment.
But
What
that
does it
changes
mean,
everything.
sacrificing the self?
Well, for me, I think it's being a parent or a mother.
We've
I mean,
learned,
how many sacrifices do we make?
haven't we had our
with
training?
each child?
Yes.
And a good training.
But the great thing is, what happens? As the simple story of King Hatim Tai shows.
It wasn't in vain.
It wasn't, no,
The sacrifices weren't in vain.
yes. Can we test it? Yes, we can. And then we know. Once we know, there's no more questions. There's no more having to bring ourselves back to a center. Or even take a deep breath. It's there. Isn't it? You've got to do it. Don't know why I bother.